Bhíl mágad de ceann agus bhhatlam fille an ceist na Palestína agus bhhatlam fáilte chu raibh an cinenne an rialtas ahananta a thabhairt don stát mar stát neamhsblach is rud is céim chun cinné sin ach tá gá le mbriathar eile is gá le gníomh a dhéanamh anois réimse leathan gníomha chun beart a dhéanamh de réir an mbriathar. I'm returning to Palestine, and it's difficult to talk actually with the images coming on our television screens night after night, and it's clearly that Israel is out of control. The government and the army is out of control, and they're acting with impunity. And while I welcome your very good decision, and it's a proud day for Ireland, and later on today the Palestinian flag will be raised, I absolutely welcome that. It has taken too long. It has taken the deaths of 36,500 people, the vast majority women and children. And it has taken their deaths, and there are more deaths today, for us to do the most basic thing that we've promised for years, to recognise the state of Palestine. And in recognising that state, we must then decide what steps will we now take to give meaning to that, because we need to give meaning to that decision. And we have taken that decision, and I'm praising you for it. However, it was taken following the protests on the ground over and over, and the sense of outrage and upset. I mean, on any given day, I think TDs in this stall were receiving up to 10,000 emails telling us to do something, to act. And while we have acted to a certain extent now with the recognition, I would like today, Taoiseach, either in response to me or later, what steps precisely you're going to take to make that meaningful. And obviously, for me, the most meaningful number of steps is to stop the troops and the arms going through Shannon, to enact the Occupied Territories Bill, to stop the trading with Israel, to have sanctions against Israel, and to recognise that they are completely out of control. And why it has taken us this long is something we need to reflect on, because we are also part of that bloodshed that's happening in Palestine, in our name. Because we have refused to act with various reports and various decisions. Amnesty International told us quite some time ago that the system was apartheid. They were running an apartheid regime. We ignored when 6 human rights organisations were classified as terrorist. And we ignored a lot of other things, including the fact, as far back as 2015, the International Criminal Court started a preliminary investigation into crimes that Israel were committing. And from 2015, slowly and methodically, the chief prosecutor built up a case to the point where she opened a formal investigation, and her successor is now following up on that. And the reason, by issuing arrest warrants, can you imagine, arrest warrants have been issued for the Prime Minister of Israel and for his Defence Minister, as well as the 3 leaders of Hamas. And that's followed on from years, slowly and methodically, building up a case, while we did nothing. We did absolutely nothing other than words. In fact, the human Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, told us we were very good on rhetoric and not on action. I'll finish on the month after the 7th of October, the General Secretary of the United Nations told us that Gaza was becoming a graveyard for children, that the nightmare in Gaza was more than a humanitarian crisis, it was a crisis of humanity. And yesterday he affirmed there was no safe place in Gaza, demanding that the horror must stop. My apologies for going over time.
I want to thank Deputy Connolly for raising the issue in relation to Palestine and the horrific humanitarian catastrophe that continues to unfold. I acknowledge her welcome for the fact that it is a proud day for Ireland in recognising the state of Palestine. And I also recognise that this is very much something that the people have led on. I very much heard that as I go around the country, and as I've met people, very respectfully and very forcefully and very passionately putting forward their view that Ireland must act. And the only point I'd slightly, not to be disagreeable, but slightly disagree with you on when you say it's taken too long, it's always been the position of this government and previous governments, and indeed many governments around the EU and other parts of the world, that recognition of a 2-state solution would come as part of a peace process. What we've actually done is change the order, because in many ways we're recognising the state of Palestine now at a time when a comprehensive, sustainable, just peace settlement looks further away than ever before. And we're doing so because because we have to keep that destination alive, because others are literally seeking to bomb it to oblivion. So I do think, and I do sense from my engagement with people in the region, from my engagement with counterparts in the region, from my engagement at an EU level, the actions that Ireland, that Spain, that Norway have taken today will have a positive effect beyond just our own recognition. For example, there are more member states in the European Union now considering doing the same. A number have publicly indicated their wish to do the same in the weeks ahead. Is it possible that you get to a point during the course of this year where a majority of member states of the European Union now recognise the state of Palestine, where a majority of prime ministers and presidents of the European Council recognise the existence of the state of Palestine? And what does that do in terms of positive momentum and change in policy and approach as well? I do think Ireland, by any objective standard, has been extraordinarily proactive in relation to this. I pay tribute to the Taoiseach, I pay tribute to our diplomats, to my own department, to my predecessor, to so many who have done a lot of work in this area, whether it's supporting the work of the ICJ when others somewhat seek to undermine it, whether it's providing additional funding in a very practical way to help the work and the investigations, whether it's increasing aid from a humanitarian point of view to UNRWA when others seek to distance themselves from UNRWA as well. These are all practical measures that we have taken. But I do believe when it comes to the Occupied Territories Bill, I mean, the clear legal advice to government is, and consistently has been, that legislation would not be compatible with EU law. And therefore, I think the ways we need to advance this is at a European level. And I think the decision yesterday of the Belgian presidency in relation to a meeting on the Israeli-EU association agreement is significant. I genuinely believe it is significant. The practical measures we now intend to take is to continue at every single forum, because ultimately the result of success or not here for everybody in the world is a cessation of violence. And anything that doesn't bring that about will prove to have been ineffective.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
We've come to the point where we're recognising the state of Palestine, where there's very little left to recognise, except the determination of the Palestinian people. Palestine has been bombed practically out of existence. The International Court of Justice last week issued a very strong order. Israel completely ignored that. Over the weekend, they dropped a 2,000-pound bomb. That's what was used, supplied by the US, our friends, of course. And there was a British, I understand, a British Air Force Shadow spy plane flying overhead at the time. Since that order, over the weekend, 200 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been murdered, and I use that word, murdered, by Israeli bombing in several areas throughout Gaza. It's glaringly obvious that the whole purpose is genocide and to eradicate the Palestinian people. I did not join in with the call for the Israeli ambassador to be expelled. And on the last occasion that I spoke, I said it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to stand by that decision. This is a woman, an ambassador, who was threatening us in relation to trade, who was openly using our airwaves to threaten us, doing exactly what Mossad did, outlined yesterday in The Guardian, what Mossad did in relation to the International Criminal Court, in relation to the chief prosecutor. So it is time for us to act. The most basic thing is not to support van der Leyen, who from day one said she would stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. That would be one obvious thing.
It's the clear position of President von der Leyen that she wishes to see an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East. That is the clear position of Ursula von der Leyen. You can shake your head if you wish, Deputy Pringle. It's the clear position of the conclusions of the April European Council. I was at it, you weren't there, but the ability to read the count, the ability for Irish people to not be misinformed or misdirected in relation to the position of the European Council, including the President of the European Commission, is important, because there's enough misinformation out there at the moment. We need to see an immediate ceasefire. We need to see practical actions to help bring that about. And as I have said on behalf of Ireland at the European Council, what I have said this morning, what I will say this evening, what I will say everywhere and in every forum, as will the government, we must now use every lever at our disposal to bring about that environment. It's not enough to just call for a ceasefire. We have to see what can be done to put pressure to make that a reality. And that's why it's the position of Ireland since March that the association agreement, the trade benefit agreement, should be reviewed. I'm pleased now to see others join us in that call. That needs to happen, because I'm not ready to stand idly by and wait for Netanyahu's apology for the tragic mistake of June, as he continually does now when there's particular horrors that emerge on our TV screens and on our radio stations. This is an extraordinarily, horrifically difficult situation. The scale of humanitarian catastrophe, I don't think, is even fully understood. And I want the people of this country to know that the government is doing everything we possibly can to voice their concerns and their views in every forum, and we're taking a very practical step in recognising the state of Palestine today to give hope to the Palestinian people at the darkest hour, and I know that's really appreciated and means a lot to people in Palestine today.